All right, we went over VTP, which is the virtual trunking protocol. Now we're going to talk about the trunking of ports. Two different things. We're going to go inside here and I'll show you, okay, the show and trunk, and I'll show you the command again. All right, because we did it when we did this. But it's just going to put the encapsulation type, which is 8021Q. And we do it because we have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, and they can't go across access ports. So we must trunk these ports. All right, because once you trunk these two ports, dynamically, these two ports down here will be trunked as well. All right, so you got to make sure that those ports are trunked. But enough talk. Let's go inside the lab and let's take a look at it. All right, welcome back, everybody. Same lab, hasn't changed. All right, but now we just finished doing the virtual trunking protocol. We found out what that was. Now we're going to talk about trunking ports, which we already did. Show, this is switch 0, which is the very top switch, the root bridge. Show int trunk. All right, as you can see, we already trunked some ports 22 and 23. We did trunk port 24, but you're not going to see it here because router 0, its interface is off. Therefore, that port 24 of the switch is going to be off as well. But the main purpose of it is to get this protocol going. The only VLAN that can go across access ports, if you remember when we created VLANs, we actually said, hey, when we were assigning VLANs, I should say, we did switch port mode access, right? In order to assign the VLANs, they had to be access ports because by default, all ports are dynamic auto. But only the native VLAN, the default VLAN, the management VLAN, the admin VLAN is the only one that can go across access ports and trunk ports. All right, it can traverse across those ports without a problem. Okay, but VLAN, any other VLAN cannot. They must go across trunk ports so they can get tagged and say, hey, you belong to VLAN 10, you belong to VLAN 20, you belong to VLAN whatever. So they know where they need to go. VLAN 1, or the native VLAN, what it has a pivot. It's a personal VLAN identifier built in within its frame. So as it's going across, the trunk ports see that. They see that, oh, okay, well, this is the native VLAN, go ahead on through. But if you do not trunk a port and you try to do VLAN 20 and try to make it ping the router or go across to any other VLAN or to the same VLAN on another switch, it's not going to be able to if that switch port is not trunked. And that's extremely important because that's one of the things that Cisco really wants you to know. All right, they need you to know that everything that's not the native VLAN must go across trunk ports. It could be called a tagged port as well, okay? And the native VLAN could be called untagged because the native VLAN has a built-in tag already. All other VLANs need to be tagged, which is called frame tagging. It assigns that hey, you belong to VLAN 10, you belong to VLAN 20, and so forth, okay? So that's what trunking does, because when we finally do inter-VLAN communication, that encapsulation that you see there highlighted, 802.1q, has to match on the router and on the switch, all right? It used to be ISL. Just like with span tree that it used to only support ISL, now it supports the newer type of encapsulation, okay, or trunking, which is 802.1q, okay? So 802.1q is the type of encapsulation we need to have, all right, for intra-VLANs, for anything. If you're doing it on this layer 2 switch, all right, and you simply go in and go switch port mode trunk, you trunk. But in layer 3 switches, this is what I was talking about earlier, that if you try to trunk a port, what's going to happen is it's going to choose, because it'll support both ISL and 802.1q. So it's a long switch port interface, blah, 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 you know, and then trunk, and then you can put ISL, whatever. So it's different syntax. That's all. That's all. But it'll allow you to use two. Here, these layer 2 switches, which is what Cisco's focusing on, it's just layer 2. So when you trunk ports, is basically going in the port, and you've done it already. Config T, and let's just pick port 24, F0/24. It's already trunked anyway. And you do switch port mode, and if you look at it, there's different modes: access, dynamic, trunk, and everything is set to dynamic auto anyway. But we want to explicitly tell it trunk, and we already did, so there's really no need to tell it. But this is how you would do it, and that's how you will look at it later on to see if that port is trunked indeed. If I don't trunk that port and we were trying to enter VLAN, PC1 will never get to PC0. Never. Because it will not be able to make it to the router because it is not trunked. It is not trunked at all. And in this situation, since we have different networks, it has to go to a router so the router can route between one network and the other. Okay? So that is what trunking is. This comes back from the days of telecommunications where they had a whole bunch of wires, lines going to this one huge trunk cable, right? Or pole, whatever you want to call it. Conduit, where all these cables went through and carried all sorts of different types of communications and what have you. This is the same thing. Trunk ports carry multiple VLANs, okay? So this is the purpose of trunking a port. As you can see, it is nothing to do, or it doesn't, with the VTP, the virtual trunking protocol. Two different jobs completely. So don't get them confused. Do not get them confused. All right? So there you go. Make sure, and I'm trying to emphasize this, make sure that if you do not have communications, let's say in this topology you see here on the left, VLAN 10, VLAN 20. Let's say you have VLAN 10 on the other side. And you have VLAN 20. You have VLAN 10, VLAN 20 on both sides. Right? But only VLAN 1 can communicate across. Well, the problem is that VLAN 10 and 20 don't have a pbit. So that means that the ports between the switches are not trunked, and they need to be in order for them to have communications. Okay? For same VLANs, no routing obviously. It has to be, VLAN 1 to VLAN 1, VLAN 10 to VLAN 10, VLAN 20 to VLAN 20. If you want to go VLAN 10 to VLAN 20, then you got to go up to the router and back down again. All right? But other than that, that's it. That's all there's to that. So pay very close attention to that, because there is a command, show switch port. Of course, show switch ports. Let me maximize this window. So I hate when this makes it easier to look at. Okay, show VLAN switch port. So interface switch port. There you go. So I know there's one of those. Show interface switch port. This looks like a pretty familiar print screen. All right. You can see right here, encapsulation .1Q. Okay. Native is always going to be operational. All right. But these are things that you want to look at. Encapsulation .1Q. All right. If that is not on, and it says access, not trunk, then that's why it's not going across. Okay. So here's the command to take a look at that. So show int switch port, and it's going to show you the ports, and what they are. Okay. And you can see, you can go through each and every port. One of you can just do switch ports, show interface switch ports. I don't think that's all. You can put the output modifiers, okay, or you can just go all the way through. Here's gig 02, gig 01. Here's port 24. You see all the switches. 23. You see it's trunked .1Q. All right, so that's what you need to see. If you don't see that, then that's your problem. Those ports must be trunked. All right, enough of that. I think we killed that to death. I'll see you outside the lab. There's not really much to say. That's what it is. It is what it is. They're trunking ports. You got to turn them on if you have VLANs. All right, from switch to switch, from switch to router. We didn't do it this way because we're really not trying to communicate. Well, we are trying to communicate this way, but they're in different subnets. So they're going to go to the router and then come back down. If we wanted them to go straight across, let's say I have VLAN 10 over here or VLAN 10 over here, then we will have to trunk these ports or trunk that port in order for it to go across as well. All right, that's all there is. That's the purpose of trunking ports. I'll see you in the next.